Hi, I'm Stephen Rodneski from GetRealOnTaxReform.info. If you want to get a better look at the reports featured in this video, go to www.getrealontaxreform.info/drowned.htm. You can view them online or print copies for yourself. Back in 1976, the taxes were higher on the super rich, as would be expected with a progressive tax system. Despite their claims of debilitatingly high rates, the top rate was officially 70.1%. After taking advantage of all the loopholes, the tax rate of the super rich 0.25%, averaged 39.5%. Since their after-tax income was over 10 times more per year than the other 99.4% of us, their complaints that they were paying too much in taxes were not widely accepted. There was one courageous group who took up their cause after receiving sufficient campaign contributions, and that group was the U.S. Congress. The agenda, of course, had to be reframed to gain popular support. So President Reagan convinced everyone that by simplifying the tax code and dramatically cutting the top rates, everyone would benefit. Now, admittedly, Congress had created a major headache for tax filers with 18 different tax brackets. This seems to me like another case where Congress created a crisis to gain enough public support to provide political cover while they catered to their rich donors. Suddenly, the progressive tax code that has been used for the previous 120 years was out. Instead, Congress arranged to drastically cut the taxes on the super rich, supposedly so that the benefit of their increasing wealth would trickle down to the rest of us. To help sell the idea to the general public, President Reagan even declared that the increased revenue would allow the federal government to wipe out, before he left office in 1980, the deficit of $909 billion, which was about $2.4 trillion in 2008 money. Instead, the radical tax cuts threw the country into an economic tailspin. Chapter 15 of my book, Conning the Rich, The Great American Fraud, goes into more detail. In an effort to rebalance the government's revenue stream, Congress, under President Reagan, had to raise taxes 11 more times, including bringing the corporate tax rate up to their current high levels. The original tax cuts that most taxpayers got were scaled way back, but the dramatic cut in taxes for the super rich not only remained, but were, believe it or not, increased even more despite the deficit. The federal budget was still so shaky that the first President Bush had to break his promise and raise taxes again in an effort to compensate for the dramatic cuts for the super rich. Instead of eliminating the deficit, it ballooned under the Reagan presidency to about $4.7 trillion in 2008 dollars. So how did we do as a country after 10 years of trickle-down economics? Despite raising taxes again, by 1992, the deficit had increased under the first President Bush to the equivalent of $6 trillion in 2008 dollars. The average after-tax income for the bottom 99.4% dropped from $39,298 to about $38,600. But the after-tax income for the super rich rose from 423,000 in 1976 to over 1.2 million in 1992. The trickling down bonus obviously had not yet happened for anyone but the super rich. But they were probably trickling all over us, and great prosperity was just around the corner, right? Well, wrong. Over the years, since Congress gutted the progressive tax system and eliminated the top income brackets under President Reagan, things have gotten progressively worse in terms of the deficit. In 2008, by the end of the second term of President Bush Jr., after more tax cuts favoring the super rich, the deficit had reached nearly $10 trillion, and the economy had tanked. The after-tax income of the middle class had dropped down to $34,000 from $36,000 in 1976. What happened to all of the promise of economic gain? Well, Congress was able to have the average tax rate of the super rich drop from 39.5% down to 23.1%. That is the main reason that the after-tax income of the top 1/4 of 1% rose from $423,000 in 1976 to $2,574,000 in 2008. They say a rising tide raises all boats. That was part of the rationale behind the commitment to dramatically cut taxes on the super rich. Well, it has been over 32 years. How has this trickle-down scheme turned out? Have we all benefited from the trickle-down economics as promised? Of course not. It was never about cutting the deficit, nor cutting taxes for most Americans. It has always been about legitimizing the belief of the super rich that was best expressed by super rich Leona Helmsley when she said, "We don't pay taxes, only the little people pay taxes." The reason is that most of the tax cutting has gone to the privileged few. In 2008 alone, the super rich saved over $176 billion in taxes compared to what they would have paid under 1976 rates. They have had similar tax savings each of the previous years. That means they saved trillions over the years, while most of us have seen little or no tax savings or income gain. Is it any wonder why in 2008 the richest 400 of the super rich each averaged over $270 million in income gains? Why have we been so compliant and allowed Congress to keep rewarding millionaires at the expense of the rest of us? Because we believe politicians who claim that they are working in our best interests, and because of cleverly orchestrated campaign to keep us fighting among ourselves. Check out the video titled "The Tea Party and the 99% for more information. Who would have guessed that a dramatic cut in taxes for the super rich would lead to dramatic increases in the wealth of the super rich? Evidently not the politicians who are trying to peddle that same bag of horse manure a third time during this election. The trillions in taxes saved by the super rich has also meant trillions lost in government revenue. That government revenue could have been used to pay down the deficit, improve roads, and, here's a thought, decrease taxes for the rest of us. Not only did the various tax cuts for the super rich harm the country in the short term, but they have continued to interfere with the ability of most Americans to flourish. the economy will continue to sputter, if not fail, as less income is shared among the 99.4% of tax filers making $500,000 or less. So let's recap. What has 30 plus years of trickle-down done? The national debt has gone from 36% of gross domestic product in 1976 to 69% of gross domestic product in 2008 and continues to rise. The average after-tax income of the bottom 41% has gone from about $12,600 in 1976 to about $8,600 in 2008. The average after-tax income of the middle class has gone from about 1/12 that of the super rich in 1976 to about 1/76 that of the super rich in 2008. The average after-tax income of the rich has gone from about 1/6 that of the super rich in 1976 to about 1/28 that of the super rich in 2008. The average after-tax income of the 1 in 400 who are the super rich rose from $423,000 in 1976 to $2,574,000 in 2008. It's time to modify the saying regarding rising tides to reflect what happened in the real world. The rising tide only funds more mega yachts. Thank you for your time, and God bless America.